Yo, what's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews. I'm back for another comprehensive preview of player picks for this upcoming 5-game slate. I've also got a value play today with odds of $7.25. That's plus 625 for those of you in the US. So stick around to see my best bets, or feel free to skip ahead using the chapters below. So before we jump into this player picks, I'll let you know that all the data that I'm going to be sharing is all from props.cash, which is my go-to tool for finding player props. If you're interested, you can sign up today and get 25% off your first month by using the code DAFT25 when you sign up. We're kicking it off with the Indiana Pacers versus the Denver Nuggets. The first play with a great matchup is our man KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and we're looking at his 10.5 points line. The reason why, the Pacers, they allow the fourth most points to shooting guards. As you can see here, he's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 9.9 points per game. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 1 of his last 2, 15 points, and then 9 points for KCP. Another player also from Denver with an excellent matchup is Michael Porter Jr., over 16.5 points. The Pacers do allow the most points to small forwards over the last 15 games. Michael Porter Jr. has also covered this in his last 2 games against the Indiana Pacers. Looking at his last 10, he's covered in 6 of his last 10 games, averaging 15.6 points per game. I do like this matchup for MPJ, but I don't know. Something about him's got me feeling a little bit off. His minutes, a little bit down on what they used to be last season, but at the same time, a lot of these games have been blowouts, so he hasn't had to play many. But look, MPJ's got a great matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if I see him hit 20, but I'm not sold on it just yet. So I'll need to do a little bit more research before I take that play. The next one is for Aaron Gordon. We're looking at his points line of over 14.5 points. As you know, the Indiana Pacers allow the 3rd most points to power forwards. It's actually trending in the wrong direction. I used to be harping on about the Pacers allow the most points, the most points, the most points. And then in more recent videos, they allow the 2nd most points to power forwards. And then today, now they allow the 3rd most points to power forwards. So, look, even though Aaron Gordon's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 15 points per game, I'm still a bit hesitant. He's covered this line in both games he's played against the Pacers, scoring 18 and 28. Does make me feel a little bit better about it, but again, still a little bit hesitant. We know Denver's most likely going to win this game. We know that the shooting guard, small forward, and power forward all have great matchups to score some points. What this actually makes me think about is whether I should take Nikola Jokic unders 24.5. But I haven't made a decision on that. Jokic went under in his last matchup against the Pacers. He has covered in 6 of his last 10, though. So he's getting a bit spicy with it, but who knows? This could be a blowout, and Jokic doesn't score the points. So all leans at the moment, haven't made my final decision. Heading into the Charlotte Hornets versus the Miami Heat. The first player with a great matchup is Bam Adebayo. We're looking at over 36.5 points and rebounds. The Hornets allow the most points and the 2nd most rebounds to centers over their last 15 games. Bam's only covered this in 3 of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, he's only covered in 1 of his last 5. So there is a lot of red out there. But once again, remember, the sportsbook have access to all the players with great matchups, right? So they'll elevate their lines. Typically, where have we seen Bam's line in the last 10 games? It's definitely been lower than where it currently sits. So his line normally sits at around 32 to 33.5 for points and rebounds. And you see that lifted today. So he does have a good matchup. He could explode. But at the same time, we don't know if Jimmy Butler's playing. Tyler Hero is questionable, but he's most likely going to play. We know a lot of players from the Charlotte Hornets are going to be out. Could there be a blowout here? Chances not. But yeah, Bam, he's got a great matchup. Someone else who's got a great matchup, though, is this fella, Jaime Jaquez Jr. He actually has a great matchup if you're looking at all stat categories. The Hornets allow the 2nd most points, the 5th most rebounds, and the 2nd most assists to small forwards. So this is definitely a play that I would jump on if I knew Jimmy Butler wasn't going to play. So if you stay close to the news and he's confirmed out and the lines haven't moved yet, Jaime Jaquez Jr. all the way. Because he's hit this line in 13 to 38 games this year, 5 of his last 10. It's not screaming out value, but if we remove Jimmy Butler from the equation, he's hitting 7 of 14 games this year, averaging 24.8. And a lot of those games didn't have the matchup that he sees today. So He's got an easy matchup, question marks on Jimmy. That's all I'd be thinking about. The next one is for Kyle Lowry. So he's got a great matchup in terms of rebounds. So the Hornets allow the second most rebounds to point guards. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. Looking back at his last 6 head-to-head matchups with the Hornets, he's covered it in 4, averaging 4.3 rebounds per game. So it's only 3 rebounds that he needs to get. Kyle Lowry back in his day was a great rebounder. I don't know if he's still got that dog in him though. So we shall see. And another player with a great matchup here is Miles Bridges, and we're looking at his assists. The Heat allow the most assists to power forwards over their last 15 games. Looking at his last 10, he's done excellent. 7 out of his last 10, averaging 3.9 assists. He got no assists in his last game, and I know it was only one game, but that one game also was the return of LaMelo Ball. So I wonder, with LaMelo Ball back in the lineup, does that make it a bit more difficult for Bridges to get those possessions to ultimately get the assist that we need? So the matchup is good, but I'm not sure about how that LaMelo Ball thing's going to work out. So I won't be touching that one, but he's got a great matchup nonetheless. We're heading into the Sacramento Kings versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo's got a great matchup today. We're looking at his over 33.5 points. The reason why, the Kings allow the second most points to power forwards. That's right. They're worse than the Indiana Pacers at slowing these guys down. Looking at his last 10, he's only covered in 3 of his last 10 games, averaging 32.3 points per game. The main ones where he's gone over, 34 against Cleveland and the 2 40-point outbursts when he did the Texas trip through San Antonio and Houston. But what's crazy is looking at his head-to-head numbers. He scored 35 and 46 points in his last 2 games against the Sacramento Kings. The total's quite high. It's like 250 points. The pace should be up. The Kings have actually slowed down a little bit, but the Bucks, they play at a rapid pace anyway. So I do like this play, to be honest, for Giannis to take his over. I just haven't bit the bullet yet. Someone else who I do like, but I was a bit unsure of, gives me KCP vibes. Malik Beasley over 11.5 points. The Kings allow the second most points to shooting guards, and they also allow the most 3-pointers made to shooting guards. So Malik Beasley lives out on the perimeter. Obviously, there's Giannis, Dame, Chris Middleton, even Brook Lopez, probably all more threatening than Malik Beasley. He was probably going to be their last scoring option out of their starting 5, but he's most likely going to be left open once the defense collapses. So Malik Beasley, great matchup. He's done it before against the Kings. Over his last 10, he's hit it 6 times. So that's a very strong lean from me, something I might get on. Who else is there? We've got Keegan Murray. We're looking at his rebounds, over 5.5 rebounds for Keegan Murray. The reason being, the Bucks allow the 4th most rebounds to power forwards. Over his last 10, he's hit this 4 times, averaging 5.9 rebounds per game. In head-to-head matchups against the Bucks, this was last season, but he recorded 4 and 2. So I'm not a fan of really picking young players like Keegan Murray on the road to get anything, to be honest. So I won't be touching that, but the matchup on paper is good. And our very last pick is Domantas Sabonis here, over 21.5 points. So the Bucks allow the 3rd most points to centers. He's covered it in his last 2 against the Bucks, and he's also covered it in 7 of his last 10 games. Sabonis. Foul trouble is a risk, but I do like that play, and I'll be talking a bit more about that one later. Jumping into the Clippers and Minnesota Timberwolves matchup, this will be a quick one because I honestly didn't expect to see any plays with a great matchup, given the way that both of these teams play defense. They're both pretty good defensive teams. I think Minnesota might be ranked number 1. And the Clippers are definitely top 10 in that regard. But Karl Anthony Towns, in terms of his assists, he's got a great matchup. So his line's over 2.5. The Clippers allow the 3rd most assists to power forwards. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 games. And there's no head-to-head matchups on record at the moment. But it's also quite a juice play anyway. Probably move to 3.5 at positive odds, at plus odds. But yeah, not one that I'm going to take. Let's jump into the next one. The final game of the day is the Phoenix Suns versus the Portland Trailblazers. And look, the Phoenix Suns are just one of those teams. They're real difficult to pick players to bet on because they're kind of stacked in a way. Bill's actually producing. Kevin Durant, his lines are always really high, similar to Devin Booker. Nurkic can go off. Grayson Allen can go off. Eric Gordon can get some buckets off the bench. So they're a very difficult team to bet when it comes to picking their individual player props, much like the LA Clippers. I tend to stay away from them too, unless I find a great matchup for Zubac, and look very much the same for Nurkic. But Devin Booker's got a great matchup in this one. The Blazers allow the 5th most points and the most rebounds to point guards. So you'd be looking at over 29.5 for Devin Booker. Against the Portland Trail Blazers, he's covered in 3 of his last 6, averaging 28.8. In his last 10 games, he's covered this only 3 times. And in those 3 games, he absolutely smashed it. But he's averaging 27.1 points and rebounds. Even though the matchup is great, I still would probably lean to the under, if I'm being honest. Blowout is a massive potential in this one. Let me have a quick look at what the line is right now. It's 10.5. So you got a 10.5 point line. Suns, they got to bounce back eventually, and what way to do it than one of the worst teams in the league. So, yeah, not liking this game too much. But another player with a great matchup is Bradley Beal, and we're looking at his rebounds and assists. That's because the Blazers allow the most rebounds and the most assists to shooting guards. So we need over 9.5 for Bradley Beal. He's covered this. Let me just break this down to this season. Yep. In his last 10 games this season, 4 of his last 10 he's covered in. He's only averaging 7.6 rebounds and assists. On the season, he's averaging 7.8. So we see a very high line compared to what his averages have been. In his head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Portland Trail Blazers, one of those being this season. So, yeah, blowout's a risk. The matchup is great, don't get me wrong. Blowout is a risk, and he doesn't have the form that tells me, yeah, he's going over. So I'd probably fade that one too. And the last one, which I'd probably consider taking this if this guy didn't hurt my feelings, it's Kevin Durant, his assists, over 4.5. The Portland Trail Blazers allow the 6th most assists to power forwards. Very selfless player, Kevin Durant is, especially when you take him to cover his points line. Tends to pass the ball a lot more. But looking at his last 10 games, he's covered this of 8 in his last 10. 6.3 average per game. It's very green, and so it should be. But at the same time, blowout is also a risk. And this line is quite juiced. So I think it's probably on its way to moving to 5.5, or you'll get it at 4.5 at pretty juiced line. So again, probably not one that I would consider taking. But one thing that I probably would consider taking in this game, and I did it today, hit the Peyton Pritchard ladder, got him up to, and made quite a bit of profit of Peyton Pritchard today. And the reason why, if anybody's in the Discord and saw that, was because I anticipated a blowout from the Boston Celtics. Everybody did, right? Everybody anticipated a blowout. And what does that mean? So when there's a blowout, a lot of bettors tend to bet on maybe unders in a blowout, or in a redemption game. They might pick good players to perform very well, but then they get stung because they don't play their full complement of minutes. What I look for when there is a blowout is what players off the bench are going to get more time and more opportunities, because their lines aren't going to indicate that. So Peyton Pritchard's line was 6.5 today. I bet him for 6.5. I bet him for 10, 15, and 20. He finished on 19, but we still made a lot of profit on Peyton Pritchard alone. If you stick around for the recap, I can show you how much profit we got from him. But in a game like this, where the Suns have a high chance of blowing the Portland Trail Blazers out, who is it on the Suns roster that could step up, score some points, and really smash their lines out? Eric Gordon, even though he comes off the bench, if it's a blowout, he probably won't see much time, to be honest. So you've got to go a little bit deeper than that. I don't have the answer for this, but I'm just sharing you what's going through my mind at the moment. So find one of those players. It'll be easier tomorrow once more lines come out. You can see whose lines look favorable. And you can use this matchup data. Obviously they give up rebounds and assists to shooting guards. Is there a rebound, or is there a shooting guard who gets rebounds and assists off the bench for the Suns that could potentially explode? Points to point guards. So is there a point guard that comes off the bench? And then assists for power forwards. I don't know who it's going to be, but yeah, definitely one thing to really consider. All right, that's the preview on the 5 games and the players with their good matchups. Let's get straight into my best bets for tomorrow or tonight, depending on where you're watching this from. The man that I'm really liking today is Domantas Sabonis. So I'm taking his over 21.5 points. So I am taking him as a value play as well. But let's get started on this single player prop. Over 21.5 points for Domantas Sabonis. He's covered this in 18 of 38 games. He's averaging 20.1 points per game this year. His last 10 have been arousing, covering in 7 of his last 10, averaging 23.3 points per game. Now, when I compare his last 10 games to his season average, His minutes, they remain the same, but we're seeing a much more aggressive approach. He's taking 2 more shots per game. And not only is he taking more shots, he's also shooting them 4% higher than his season average over his last 10 games. So he's taking more and he's making more at a higher percentage. He also has an excellent matchup. As I just mentioned earlier, the Bucks allow the third most points to centers over their last 15 games. Now, not only is the matchup great for Sabonis, he has some strong form playing against them. Now, Domantas Sabonis has played the Bucks 3 times in a Sacramento Kings uniform, and he's covered this line in every single game. The spread, it's only 4.5 points. The Bucks are favorites, so the books are expecting a tight affair. And if it is, Sabonis is going to play 35 plus minutes, provided he doesn't get into foul trouble. Now, if I break down Sabonis's games, last 5 games, where he's played more than 35 minutes, he's covered this line in every single game, averaging 28.4 points per game. The total set for this game, close to 250 points. So buckets are going to be scored. The Kings, they're also on the road for this game, and I love it for this bet because Sabonis is averaging 1.6 points more on the road compared to when he is at home. Now, Sabonis is ticking all the boxes in this one. His recent form is great. His shot attempts are up. Blowout potential is low. He has a great matchup, and he's covered this line well against him in the past. So I'm also taking Sabonis as a value play here. Now, get your sports book out and all write this down. I like over 21.5 points, over 11.5 rebounds, and under 7.5 assists. You can get that for $7.25 plus $6.25 on Bet365. I've spoken about his points. Let's talk a little bit about his rebounds. His rebounds are probably the riskiest play out of all 3 legs. The Bucks, they don't allow many rebounds to centers based on their last 15 games. They've got Brook Lopez out there. He normally stretches the floor to create some space to drive, and that's going to take Sabonis out of the paint. He also rebounds better at home compared to when he's on the road. And I'm talking about Sabonis here. And this has been evident in his last 2 matchups against the Bucks. So he had 17 rebounds against the Bucks when they played in Sacramento. And he had 12 rebounds against the Bucks when he was on the road. So that's the riskiest play, but at the same time, he still hit the number that we needed. It just might be a bit of a sweat there. Into his assists, 7.5 assists, and we're taking his unders. If I love playing unders as single bets, I'd definitely be taking his assists, and here's why. He's covered this assist line in only 4 of 18 games on the road this season, which is crazy. At home, he's covered this line 13 out of 20 games. That's very much because he's role players. They don't shoot the ball very well on the road. And plus, he tends to take more of a scoring role on when the team's traveling. So it's not the most overly surprising stat, given a lot of young players don't tend to fare very well on the road, and you rely on your seasoned, your veterans, your star players to get a lot more buckets. So that's what I'm thinking. If you wanted to make this a little bit safer, overs in points, under in assists, you'll probably get that around $3.40 to $3.60, depending on what sportsbook you use. But I think that's a great correlation there on Sabonis. My next bet hasn't been submitted yet, so I'm not too sure. There's a lot of heavy leans that I have at the moment, if I'm just going to be honest with you. If you're interested in seeing what I eventually land on, you can jump into the Discord, completely free. If you are in the Discord already, I encourage you to get amongst it, get into the chats, question some things, fight with somebody. Just get those chats fired up. But yeah, strong leans at the moment. If I had to share with you right now what I'm liking the most based off the matchups that I've seen, I'm probably thinking Giannis to score points, Malik Beasley to score some points as well. All of those just happen to be in the same game. It's primed. 250 points expected to be scored in that game. The line's only 4.5, so a lot of these guys should play their full complement of minutes. What else is there? Denver versus the Pacers look strong, blowout potential, but KCP or MPJ, one of those is going to have a breakout game, I believe. Hornets versus the Heat, a lot of those plays are dependent on Jimmy Butler playing. Because if Jimmy's not there, a lot of people tend to pop off. When he is there, everyone's pretty mediocre. Tyler Hero is also questionable as well, so I probably wouldn't take anything in that one. Clippers versus the Wolves. I think I'll be able to find something in that. The matchup data is not great, but if I look hard enough, I'm pretty confident I'll be able to find something. So haven't landed on anything yet, but I should find something. And that Blazers versus Suns game, I'll be looking out for probably an hour or two before game time. Once the role players come out and I see their lines, I'll be looking for some value in that one. But look, that's all I really got for you.
That's a lie. I've got a recap for you as well. Let's jump straight into the recap and then I'll be on my way. Okay, I just remembered that on my last video, I didn't necessarily share any tips. I did the live stream because I was too busy. So there's a whole lot of leans talking through things. I think I ended up on Zach LaVine. Overs in assists. That was at plus money, so that cashed. And then Austin Reeves took his over in assists, but LeBron got pulled out. His assist shot up to 8.5. His line. Then he only finished on 4 anyway. So that was played it well, but he didn't play well in that regard. D'Lo stepped into the starting point guard and absolutely killed it on the assist front. The other one I had was Trae Young and Clint Capella. So Trae Young got his assists. Capella didn't get his rebounds, so that was unfortunate. But what I'm sharing with you now is just all the tips that I share in the Discord. Everything I share on YouTube is also included in this, but I just wanted to show you how things went yesterday. Look, on the season, I'm at 118 units profit, over that 10% mark that I like to be. Where's the day that just went? All right, so here, starting with Peyton Pritchard, took him at 6.5, 14.5, and 19.5 points. I forgot to add the 10.5 points into that as well. Whoops, missed one bet, so I missed a little bit more profit on my tracker there. My good. Oh, no, here it is. What am I talking about? 6.5, 9.5, 14.5, 19.5. So overall, on Peyton Pritchard alone, we made, what's that? That's close to, so we made about six units profit on Peyton Pritchard alone on that ladder. Here's that Trae Young play that didn't cash. Here's Zach LaVine. He cashed. I also had a value play on Zach LaVine, under 21.5 points, 3 rebounds, and 7 assists. That paid 9-1 odds. So made a lot of profit off those guys. There's Austin Reeves, who sucked. SGA took his under in rebounds and assists. That was looking excellent at halftime. I didn't watch the game, but when I checked it at the end, I was surprised to see that he absolutely killed it in every way, shape, and form. I also had a value play on SGA. Didn't get close because he busted his rebounds and assist line. And the last play there was Dario Saric. Took his over assist line of 3.5, and then he finished off on 6. So a pretty strong day. Personally, we're in the green for every single month in the NBA. We've still got half the month to go for January, so hopefully I can get that to about 20 to 30 units, and I'll be very happy. So, look, if you guys want to see what I land on, obviously that Discord is where it's going to be at. But look, that's a wrap on today's video. If you made it this far, I thank you. For all the subscribers who keep subscribing and everyone who's dropping comments, I honestly do appreciate it. Work that algorithm for me, baby. Let's get seen. Let's get back into the green. Let me know in the comment section what you decide to land on. Are you taking any of these leans that I've shared? Are you following the best bet? Or have you got your own excellent plays? I'd love to see them. Like I said before many times, I'm no professional. I like creating content. I like doing analysis. I love basketball to bits. I've played it for almost 30 years. Let's go. It's a good recipe for me to keep doing what I'm doing. Win or lose, we're going to make it happen. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Here's that outro song, baby.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.